Chapter 1: The Supernatural in History. In the same way that philosophy, for the Christian, does not exist as a separate discipline, neither is there for him any purely human history. Man has been divinely called to the supernatural state. This state is the end of man. The annals of humanity should offer a trace of this truth. God could have left man in his natural state, but it was pleasing to his bounty to call him to a superior order. By communicating himself to him and calling him to the vision and possession of his own divine essence in his final state. Natural physiology and psychology are thus powerless to explain to man his destiny. In order to do so completely and exactly, one must have recourse to the revealed element. And all philosophy which pretends to determine the end of man by reason alone, apart from faith, is for that very reason tainted with and convicted of heterodoxy. God alone was able, through revelation, to teach man all that there is in the divine plan. There alone is the key to the real framework of man. Without doubt, reason can, in its speculations, analyze the phenomena of the spirit, soul, and body. However, for the same reason that it cannot grasp the phenomenon of grace, which transforms the spirit, soul, and body, and unites them to God in an ineffable manner, neither can it fully explain to man what he is, either when sanctifying grace dwells within him, making him a divine being, or when this supernatural element has been driven away by sin, or even when, still unpenetrated by it, man finds that he has descended beneath himself. Thus there is not, nor could there be, any true knowledge of man outside of the point of view of revelation. Supernatural revelation was not necessary in itself. Man had no right to it, but God gave it and promulgated it, and thenceforth nature alone is not sufficient to explain man. Grace, the presence or absence of grace, enters into the first line of anthropological study. There is not one single faculty in us which does not call for its divine complement. Grace aspires to cover man in all his depth, to fix itself in him in all its degrees. And it is so that nothing may be lacking to the natural and supernatural harmony in this privileged creature that the man-God has instituted his sacraments, which take hold of man, lift him up, and deify him. From the moment of birth up until the moment when he nears that eternal vision of the supreme good, which he already possesses, but which he cannot yet perceive except by faith. But if man cannot be known in his entirety outside the light of revelation, is it possible to imagine that human society, in its diverse phases called history, could ever be explicable without calling for that same divine torch which makes our nature and our individual destinies clear to us? Could humanity somehow have an end different to that of men? Will humanity be shown to be something other than men multiplied? No. In calling men to divine union, the Creator invites the whole of humanity at the same time. We will see this clearly on the last day, when all the millions of glorified individuals will form, at the right hand of the sovereign judge, that immense people that, as St. John tells us, no man could number. In the meantime, humanity, and I would like to say history, is the great theater in which the importance of the supernatural element reveals itself in broad daylight. either through the docility of peoples to the faith, when it rules over the base and perverse tendencies which make themselves felt in nations and individuals alike, or through misuse of human freedom when it collapses and seems to disappear, which would result in the suicide of empires if God had not created them healable. History must therefore be Christian if it wants to be true, for Christianity is the complete truth. Every historical framework that sets aside the supernatural order in its exposition and appreciation of the facts is a false framework. It does not explain anything and leaves the annals of humanity in chaos and in permanent contradiction to all the ideas that reason forms about the destinies of our race here below. It is because they have felt this that the historians of our day, who do not belong to the Christian faith, have let themselves be led into such strange ideas when they have sought to provide what they call the philosophy of history. This need for generalization did not exist in the times of paganism. The historians of the Gentiles had no overview of human history. The idea of homeland was everything to them. From the author's tone, one would never imagine that he was in the least bit caught up in any affection for the human species considered in itself. Moreover, it is only with the advent of Christianity that history begins to be treated in a comprehensive manner. Christianity, by always taking into account the supernatural destinies of the human race, has accustomed our spirit to see things beyond the narrow circle of a selfish nationalism. It is in the age of Jesus Christ that human fraternity has revealed itself, and only since then has general history become the object of study. Paganism, if it had ever been up to the task of writing a complete history of the world, would never have been able to write more than a cold statistical study of facts. It has not been sufficiently noted that the Christian religion created the true science of history by giving it the Bible for its base. No one can deny that today, despite the passage of the centuries, despite its gaps, we are all in all further advanced in our knowledge of ancient peoples than were the historians that antiquity itself handed down to us. Thus, the non-Christian authors of the 18th and 19th centuries have borrowed the mode of generalization from the Christian method, but have directed it against the Orthodox system. They felt early on that, by taking hold of history and conforming it to their own ideas, they were dealing a harsh blow to the supernatural principle. So true is it that history testifies in favor of Christianity. Their success in this regard has been immense. Not everyone is obliged to follow and appreciate a sophism, but everyone understands a fact, a series of facts, above all when the historian possesses that particular tone which each generation expects of those it privileges with captivating it. 3 schools have taken turns in exploiting the field of history, and, at times, they have done so simultaneously. 1. The fatalist school. One could say the atheistic, which sees only necessity in events and shows the human species grappling with invincible chains of brutal causes followed by inevitable effects. 2. The humanitarian school, which prostrates itself before the idol of the human race, proclaiming its progressive development with the help of revolutions, philosophies, and religions. This school quite freely consents to admit the action of God at the beginning as giving humanity its principle. But once humanity is emancipated, God lets it go its own way, and it advances in the way of an undefined perfection, stripping itself along the way of everything that could be an obstacle to its free and independent progress. Finally, 3. The naturalist school. The most dangerous of the three, because it offers a semblance of Christianity in proclaiming on each page the action of divine providence. Its principle is to constantly minimize the supernatural element. For this school, revelation does not exist. Christianity is a happy and beneficial occurrence in which the action of providential causes appears. But who knows if tomorrow, if in a century or two, the infinite resources that God possesses for the government of the world will not bring about this or that still more perfect form, with the help of which the human race will be seen to run on, under the eye of God, to new destinies, and history will be illuminated with greater splendor. Outside of these 3 schools, there remains only the Christian school. This school does not search about. It does not invent. It does not even hesitate. Its procedure is simple. It consists in judging humanity just as it judges the individual. Its philosophy of history is in its faith. It knows that the Son of God made man as the king of this world, that all power has been given to him in heaven and on earth. The appearance of the Word incarnate here below is, for this school, the culminating point of the annals of human history. This is why it divides history into 2 great sections, before Jesus Christ and after Jesus Christ. Before Jesus Christ, many centuries of waiting. After Jesus Christ, a length of which no man holds the secret, because no man knows the hour of the birth of the last of the elect. For this world is preserved only for the sake of those elect, who will be the cause of the coming of the Son of God in his flesh. With this certainty, certain with a divine certitude, history no longer holds any mysteries for the Christian. If he looks at the period which elapsed before the incarnation of the Word, everything is explained before his eyes. The movement of the different races, the succession of empires. This is the way cleared for the coming of the man-God and his envoys. The depravity, the darkness, the incredible calamities are the indication of humanity's need to see the one who is at once the Savior and the light of the world. Without doubt, God doomed this first period of man to ignorance and chastisement, yet far off, help was assured to him, and it was to this period that Abraham, the father of all believers to come, would belong. It is just, however, that the greatest diffusion of grace should take place later, through the divine hands of the one without whom nothing can be just, either before or after his coming. At last, he comes, and humanity, whose progress had been suspended, starts along the path of light and life. The Christian historian follows the destinies of human society even more closely in this second period, when all the promises are fulfilled. The teachings of the man-God reveal with a supreme clarity the mode of appraisal which he must employ to judge events, their morality, and their significance. He has but one measure, whether he is dealing with a man or a people. Everything which expresses, maintains, or propagates the supernatural element is socially useful and advantageous. Everything which upsets, frustrates, and annihilates it is socially disastrous. By this infallible procedure, he understands the role of men of action, of events, of crises, of transformations, of deteriorations. He knows in advance that God acts in his goodness or permits in his justice, but never deviates from his eternal plan, which is to glorify his Son in his humanity. But what always makes the eye of the Christian historian steadier and calmer is the assurance given to him by the Church, which marches unceasingly before him like a luminous column, divinely illuminating all his judgments. He knows what a close tie unites this Church to the man God, that by his promise she is safeguarded against all error in the teaching and general guidance of Christian society, that the Holy Ghost animates and guides her. It is in her, therefore, that the Christian historian seeks the rule for his judgments. The weaknesses of churchmen and passing abuses do not astonish him, for he knows that the goodman of the house has resolved to tolerate the cockle in his field until the harvest. If he must tell sad stories which bear witness to the passions of humanity, then he is careful, at the same time, to attest to the might of God's arm, which sustains his work. Yet he knows where leadership shows itself. The spirit of the Church, her divine instinct. He receives them. He accepts them. He confesses them courageously. He applies them in his narratives. Also, he never betrays, never compromises. He calls good what the Church judges to be good, and evil what the Church judges to be evil. What does he care about the sarcasm and clamor of short-sighted cowards? He knows that he is in the truth, since he is with the Church, and the Church is with Christ. Others persist in seeing only the political side of events. They lower themselves to the pagan point of view. The Christian historian remains firm, because he is certain in advance of not being mistaken. If today appearances seem to be against his judgment, he knows that tomorrow the facts of which the import has not yet been revealed will prove the Church and him right. This role is humble, but what comparable safeguards do the fatalist, the humanitarian, and the naturalist historians have? They put forward their personal judgment. Everyone, therefore, has the right to turn their back on them. In order to get at the Christian historian, it is necessary to first demolish the Church on which he depends. It is true that for 19 centuries, tyrants and philosophers have been trying, but her walls are so solidly constructed that until now they have still not succeeded in detaching a single stone. But if our historian, in following the sequence of the events of this world, sets out to research and report on the aspect which connects each one of them more or less remotely to the supernatural principle, then with even greater reason is he careful not to keep silent, not to conceal, not to mitigate extraordinary facts which God produces, with the aim of authenticating and making still more palpable the marvelous character of the relations which he has established between himself and humanity. First of all, there are the three great manifestations of divine power, which give, by means of miracles, the divine seal to the destinies of man on earth. The first of these facts is the existence and role of the Jewish people in the world. The historian cannot dispense himself from bringing into broad daylight the alliance that God first contracted with this tiny people, the incredible prodigies which sealed it, the hope of humanity that was placed in the blood of Abraham and David, the mission given to this feeble and disregarded race of preserving the knowledge of the true God and the principle of morality in the midst of the successive defection of almost all peoples. The migrations of the people of Israel, first to Egypt, later to the center of the Assyrian Empire, as and when the theater of human affairs displaced and scattered them. So that on the eve of the day on which Rome, the momentary heiress of other empires, would find herself queen and mistress of the greater part of the civilized world, she would find that the Jews had preceded her everywhere. They were already there, with their oracles translated into the Greek language, known by all peoples, isolated, unassimilable, a sign of contradiction, but giving testimony that there would soon come, nearing day by day, he who must unite all the nations and gather together in one the children of God that were dispersed. It is with pleasure that our author will demonstrate this miraculous influence of the Jewish people, which defies all ordinary laws of history, by the prophecies entrusted to this people, which, for us, are not only the torch of the past, but which also preoccupied the Gentiles so greatly during the centuries which preceded and followed the coming of the Son of God. Cicero had heard the echo of them when he spoke with a sort of mysterious terror about the new empire which was being prepared. Virgil, in the most harmonious of his songs, echoed the tone of Isaiah. Tacitus and Suetonius attested that the entire universe was turning in expectation towards Judah, with the general presentiment of seeing arise the men who were going to achieve the conquest of the world from that nation. Rerum poterentur. They will take possession of all things. After this, can it be denied that the study of history, in order to be authentic, must take on the tone and colors of the supernatural? The second fact, which is tied to the first, is the conversion of the Gentiles, both within the Roman Empire as well as outside it. The Christian historian sets out to show that this immense outcome proceeds directly from the hand of God, who, in order to accomplish it, dispensed with simply providential laws. He points out, with St. Augustine, the miracle of miracles. With Bossuet, the divine coup d'etat which had its equal only at the moment when creation came forth from nothingness for the glory of its author. He relates both the colossal grandeur of the goal and the insufficiency of the means, the significant preparations for so great a change, which presage that this world must belong to Jesus Christ, and at the same time that these preparations were in themselves just another obstacle to all human success in the venture. The apostles, armed only with words and with the gift of miracles, which proved their authority and enabled them to win people over, the Jewish prophecies, studied, compared, and more deeply understood throughout the entire empire, these elements becoming, as the writers of the first 3 centuries attest, one of the most powerful instruments of conversion. The superhuman constancy of the martyrs, whose almost incessant immolation, far from extirpating the new society, spread and affirmed it. Finally, after 3 centuries, the cross, the gibbet of the Son of Mary, crowning the diadem of the Caesars. Ideas, language, laws, mores, in a word, all things transformed according to the plan brought from Judea by this new kind of conqueror, whom the empire awaited, and who knew how to triumph over it by shedding their blood under its sword. The Christian historian is at ease amid of all these prodigies, and nothing surprises him, for he knows and proclaims that everything here below is for the elect, and that the elect are for Christ. Christ is at home in history. It is therefore quite clear that it cannot be explained without him, and that with him it appears in all its clarity and grandeur. The next part of the annals of human history corresponds to the first, but ever since the publication of the gospel, the destinies of the world have taken on a new momentum. The earth, having waited for her king, now possesses him. The supernatural preparation that was manifested in the role of the Jewish people, and that other preparation, at the same time natural and supernatural, that was manifested in the ever-progressive march of Roman power, have each reached their term. Everything is consummated. Jerusalem yields her rights and honors to Rome. Titus is the executor of the high works of the Heavenly Father, avenging the blood of his eternal Son. And yet the miracle of the Jewish people does not cease. It is transformed, and the nations will behold until the eve of the last day the spectacle no longer of a privileged people, but of a people cursed by God. To the pagan empire, which, without knowing it, built the capital of the kingdom of Jesus Christ, God will give 3 more centuries to preside. Thence will come the bloody edicts, which have no other effect than to show the supernatural vigor of Christianity to future ages. Then, when the time comes, it too will yield its place. From there it will go and take refuge on the Bosphorus, in the imperishable dynasty of the Vicars of Christ, which has not left its post since the martyrdom of St. Peter, its first link, will wear the crown in the city of 7 hills. The empire will crumble piece by piece under the blows of the barbarians, but before inflicting on it the humiliation and chastisement that its secular crimes have heaped on it, divine justice will wait until Christianity, victorious over its persecutions, has extended its branches high and far enough everywhere to tower over the waves of this new deluge. It will then be seen to cultivate, once again and with total success, the earth which has been renewed and rejuvenated by these waters, still more purifying than they are devastating. Then, having presented all of these marvels, will the Christian historian change the tone of his accounts? Will he return to a simply providential explanation of the pomp of the earth? Are these marvelous things merely the central point of the annals of human history, such that henceforth the action of God must remain veiled under secondary causes until the end of time? God forbid. A third supernatural fact, a fact which must last until the consummation of the ages, calls for his attention and requires all his eloquence. This fact is the preservation of the Church through time, without mixture in her doctrine, without alteration in her hierarchy, without suspension in her duration, without faltering in her march. 1,000 great human affairs have begun, have developed, and have fallen into decline. The ordinary running of Providence watched over them for the duration of their existence. Today there is no more trace of them except in history. The church is still standing. God sustains her directly. And every man of good faith, capable of applying the laws of analogy, can read in the facts concerning her this immortal promise that she bears at her base, written by the hand of God. She will last forever. Heresies, scandals, defections, conquests, revolutions, nothing has succeeded. Pushed out of one country, she advances on another, always visible, always Catholic, always conquering, and always under attack. This third fact, which is merely the consequence of the first, ultimately gives the Christian historian the raison d'etre of humanity. He concludes that the vocation of our race is obviously a supernatural one. That all the nations on earth not only belong to God, who created the first human family, but are also, as the prophet said, the particular domain of the man-God. And so, no more mysteries in the succession of the centuries, no more inexplicable vicissitudes. Everything moves towards the goal. Every problem resolves itself by this divine fact. Admittedly, it takes courage to treat history in this mode today, above all, when one is not of the clergy. When one believes sincerely, when one would not want for anything in the world to be full of the sense and manners of the fatalist and humanitarian schools. But the naturalist school is so great in number and talent, and so benevolent towards Christianity, that it is difficult to defy it completely, and not to be, in their eyes, merely a mystic writer, or at most, a man of poetry, when one aspires to the reputation of science and philosophy. All that can be said is that history has been treated from this point of view by two great Christian geniuses, and that their reputation was not thereby shipwrecked. The City of God by St. Augustine and the Discourse on Universal History by Bossuet are two applications of this theory. The way, therefore, is masterfully marked out, and in following such men, one can endure the futile judgments of contemporary naturalism. Without doubt, it is no small thing to model one's intimate life on the supernatural principle. But it would be a grave inconsistency, a serious culpability, were this principle not to guide the pen. Let us look at humanity in its relations with Jesus Christ, its head. Let us never isolate it, either in our judgments or in our narrative. And when we consider a map of the world, let us remember above all that we have before our eyes the empire of the man-God and of his church.